Our first guest is Elder James Allen. Mr. Allen has proudly served as the Chancellor for the Yukon University since 2020, bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience to the position. Building on his journey as former chief of the Champagne-Ajac First Nations and his experience as a respected land claims negotiator. He is a champion for Danke, which is a revival of languages, and has been a strong advocate for building resources within order to realize the promise and potential of self-government. Joining me to talk about the past, the present, and the bright future ahead for the university and education across the territory is Chancellor of the Yukon University, Mr. James Allen. Good morning, James. How are you doing today?
Morning.
For the listeners that may not know you, sir, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your personal journey?
Okay, Jamena uye danke. Amake bestial uye. Atake jackal uye. Ata burwas sananol. Amake ishi san. Agungda iche Champagne-Ajac Tsanino. Good morning, everybody. I'll do some introduction of who I am and some of my lifestyle or my life through the years and how education played a big part in it. But I'm glad to see that there's a mixture of people because I think they're the ones that, the young ones are the ones that are going to carry on after we're gone. But first of all, those of you that can stand up, could you stand up for a minute? And the elders can remain seated if they want. Good. Now I want you to do a couple of jumping jacks. Go. Just don't hit your partner. Good. Okay. Good. Sit down. Now that you got to get the blood flowing and the oxygen to the brain, because I'm going to tell you a great story about education today.
Right on.
So. And I just to let you know, one of the things I learned earlier in my career is that if you have a mic, you can get people to do crazy things. So that's an education in itself. My name is James Allen. My mother came from Ajac, and my dad came from Burwash. My dad's dad came from Copper Center in Alaska, and my mom's lineage is the Isaac family. So it doesn't look like it, but I got blue blood in me. So anyhow, I'll give you a glimpse of my life and how I came to be here today. And my story is a story that probably thousands of First Nations in my generation went through. We were survivors of the residential school. And I see one of my oldest friends from residential school, Walter Peters, back there. Him and I were friends when we were that small in residential school. And we're still friends today. But my life started off on a kind of a rocky path when I was just a toddler. I was about probably 1 or 2 years old when I got sent out to Charles Camsell Hospital for TB. And I don't see Bernie Johnson, but Bernie, I remember Bernie as being one of the tuberculosis kids too. And we were in a huge room like this with a whole bunch of cribs, like the tables are here. And we were put into those cribs there. You know, there was no love. There was, and there was a lot of crying that you can remember. That's, I can't hardly remember most of it, but I started out early in life being a survivor because my parents weren't there. There was, like I said, there was no love, no nurturing. When I got back to Whitehorse here, down at Sleepy Hollow, there was a place called Sleepy Hollow. The nurses brought me down to my parents, and I was running away from my parents because I didn't know who they were. Mm-hmm. And my stepsister Annie was the one that caught me up and brought me back, and so I was in my mom and dad's home for a while, and then I got sent out to residential school in 1954 when I was 7 years old. And that was a rough go too. I think there's a lot of people that, again, there was no love, no nurturing. So, and I stayed in residential school from grade 1 to grade 6. And from there, in grade 6 in 1960, the Indian Affairs decided that they could integrate us into the public schools. So we were the first students at Yukon Hall in 1960. And we started going from Yukon Hall, we started going to Selkirk Street School. And from there, I think a lot of people, when you're in Yukon Hall, you're just starting to become a teenager, and people know their life during these teenage years. Because there's a lot of stories. If Dave Joe was here, he would agree with me on this one. There's a lot of stories in Yukon Hall that should remain buried and should never see the light of day. But anyhow, from during that time, I used to go home to my mom and dad, and they were on the trap line a lot. So that's where my real education started, I think, because and my parents, my mom was a traditional lady, and she all she spoke in our home was Southern Shoshone. So I got the privilege of learning my language early, and my two sisters became language teachers because of that, because of my parents teaching us Southern Shoshone, or just speaking Southern Shoshone. And there was a lot of skills in the bush that my parents taught me. My mother helped me set my first squirrel snare line. So I'd run the squirrel snares by myself sometimes. And and to learn about life, if you're out there, you got to work to keep alive. One, you got to bring in the wood. Two, you got to help pack in the water. And so life skills, our school started early. We didn't wait till we were 7 years old to start learning. And and in my life, I've in my high school years, I was in school in Vancouver. They sent me to high school from FH, and I went halfway through grade 11. Actually, didn't graduate high school, but that being said, I thought I was too smart for school. So I ended up in Prince George early in life. I was about 19, I guess, and I started. I had my own car. During the previous summer, I had worked out here for White, Hosford, and Impey all summer in the bush. So I had enough money, and I had my own car. So I left I threw my suitcase out the window of this residence I was staying at, and I left, and I ended up in Prince George with a friend of mine, Donnie Isaac. He had an aunt there, so we went there, drove up there with a '56 Meteor, no insurance, just the license plate. But it was I mean, when you're in that kind of when you grow up that way, you start making decisions for yourself, and some of those decisions are not very good. You know, like myself, I decided to quit school before I graduated from high school, and I was thinking that I'd make my fortune in the sawmills in BC, but it was a tough life, and around that time, because of all the negative impacts of, I guess, my early childhood and that, and it's the same with any other First Nations person that grew up around there, you started developing addictions, and one of my worst addictions was alcohol. I started abusing alcohol, and it took me a long time, a long part of my life to get over that. But when I was in, I hope we.
You just go, buddy.
Am I okay?
You're okay.
I kind of wander when this is my life story, and that's the way it went, wandering. Anyhow, when I was in Prince George, the place we were staying, Donnie Isaacs, his aunt had 5 kids, so I went to the streets in Prince George, and I slept in my car a lot. And there's a church there that used to give out a can of Click at 4 o'clock every day, and I still love Click. Anyhow, and I would park outside of the bars. I was too young to go in. You had to be 21. I was 19 or so, and I would take the people that were too drunk to walk home for $2. And in those cases, that was good money. If you can take at least 4 people home, you get to eat and you get a little bit of gas for your vehicle. So, but I finally did get a sawmill job, and I lived down there for 4 years. I didn't phone home. I guess really drove my parents crazy, I guess, not knowing where I was. And one Christmas, I got a tap on the shoulder while I was walking. I lived in Cornell 2 of those years because I was working in Cornell. But I got a tap on the shoulder, and here was my brother-in-law, Gary Bradish, and I said, "What are you doing here?" I was surprised to see him. And he said, "Well, your mother sent us down to look for you." And so I came home that Christmas, but I had to go back out, and because I had a steady job, and I went back out. And a lot of times in my early employment, I was always a hard worker. And I guess when you have addictions, you have to prove to people that that you can work. You're a hard worker. You're worth something. And so they've always asked me to see if I ever come back down that way to look them up and for a job. And the funny thing was that in Cornell, all my friends, my young friends at that time, were all white people. And I didn't find it. I found it strange later, but one of my friends asked me, "Are you a half-breed?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, how come you're not on the reserve?" I said, "I was full-blooded, full status Indian." And they said, "Well, how come you're not on the reserve?" Then it dawned on me why I didn't see no young Native people on the streets in Cornell. They were all in the reserves and that. and to me that kind of didn't make sense because at that time, even talking to the white people and having the white people as friends, to me it was on an even level. I decided early in life that I was not below anybody, and that's what the young people have to do is to believe in yourself, be proud of who you are, because and anyhow, I moved back up to the Yukon after that experience, and it was a great experience because what it taught me was how to depend on myself, because there was no family members down there that I can go to crash out at night or eat, you know. So you had to become independent. And so when I came back up here, I kind of just milled around with my community in Haines Junction. And back in those days, you could pack a case of beer into any house in Haines Junction and start a party. It was after that some of our parents and that there was a religious revival, and some of our parents sobered up and with religion back then. Mm-hmm. But there was no organization of a government, and I remember Elijah when he came to my dad's trap line over at Silver Creek. That and I was trapping then with my dad, and he came there with Ron Chambers. Ron Chambers was a young man then, and they came and Elijah started talking just land claims, and back then I didn't know what he was talking about, but he went to all the cabins back in the bush, and he took this message. I don't know where Elijah got the idea of land claims, but if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be where we are today. Mm-hmm. You know, he single-handedly started the movement, and a lot of the people in the early CYFN days the leaders were from Yukon Hall, you know, like Harry Al and Dave Joe, Harold Kane, all of these people, and I think when I look at it, I think the reason there were so many leaders that came out of that system at that timing in life was that we were survivors. We had learned how to make decisions for ourselves, whether it be good or bad, and so we got a lot of good leaders back there that started the land claims movement, and one of the messages that came out of the Together Today for Children Tomorrow was education. And they talked about how education was not meeting the standards for our people. Our people were falling out of the system, and that there's and it even mentioned that there should be a university in the Yukon, because our kids were being sent out to universities at that time. And today, we do have a Yukon University, and I'm proud to say that I'm a chancellor for time being, anyhow. And back there is our president, Leslie Brown. And you know, the other thing is that it also mentioned that Indian people should take control of their education. And that's happening because you're going to hear from speakers after me talk about Yukon First Nations Education Directorate. So that's happening. There's probably a school that's going to be started in Burwash very soon. That's going to be First Nations school. So we've come a long way from the days when Walter Peters and I were playing in the playground at Chutla Residential School. I got a laugh out of the. I recently gave, as Chancellor, I gave Dave Joe his honorary degree, and Dave's little speech was that never in his life did he think when we were running around the Yukon Hall that he would be accepting a degree from me. So, anyhow, going back to my life story, I came back and there was a movement to include First Nations people in the federal government. It was like an affirmative action program, and they were recruiting First Nations people to work within the forestry department, and I was one of them. There were 6 of us, so I worked in most of the communities. I worked in Watson Lake and Dawson, Farrell. But when I first started out, I was just a Joe boy, just somebody they hired to work within the federal system, and I don't think the departments were ready to bring on these 6 people because there was no program, no training program to start. We just kind of wandered around and played cards up in the storeroom. Anyhow, one day they asked me, they said, I was working in Dawson then, and they said, do you want to go to Old Crow? And I said, why? And they said, well, there were a number of, they call them ARMOs, or Assistant Resource Management Officers. There were a number of them down here, like Whitehorse, Ross River. Glen Grady was the ARMO there, and other places, and they had tried to recruit people to go up there, but they didn't want to go to Old Crow. Mm-hmm. So they approached me and said, "Do you want to? If you go up there, we'll promote you to ARMO, which is an assistant ranger, and we'll give you a brand new 3-bedroom house." And I was single at that time. Anyhow, a 3-bedroom house, and they had a brand new office and garage complex. And then they said they'd send me to forestry school. So I went to school in Hinton, Alberta, the forestry school down there, and I became a forestry ranger. But in the meantime, I made a lot of friends in Old Crow. I met a good friend who taught me a lot of things, and that was Charlie Abel, because I went out trapping with him on the Dempster one winter, and I'll never do that again, though. It was so cold and dark. Anyhow, Charlie taught me a lot of things. You don't have... the one thing that the young people have to learn is that school is just one part of learning. You have to open your minds to learn when you're out at home or on the road. You're always learning.
You got to learn how to make homebrew too, James.
Right.
Don't forget about that, buddy.
That's another story. That's what a story.
Tell it. It's fun. It's good.
Charlie and I. That's one thing Charlie taught me. I don't. I'll mix my. I only have a short time with you guys, so that's a long story. Anyhow, I learned a lot along the way. I didn't become who I am today because I took everything. I mean, I learned everything on my own. I had people who inspired me, and who, especially Charlie. He would tell me stories about how he trapped in the old days up on Crow Flats over at on the Dempster, all that. So that's why I thought, well, I'll try to go out and go trapping with him. I had a job in town, a steady job. I quit that. I bought a Skidoo, 2 barrels of gas, and I went up to Old Crow, flew it up on the sked. And Old Crow at that time was given $5,000 to help their trappers go out on the line. So I ended up on the Dempster, and that, you wake up in the morning in a tent, and you got to break the icicles off of the top of your sleeping bag to load up the stove. So those were pretty tough times. But it was learning. I learned to survive in the cold, in the bush. After my days with forestry, I got a job. I went to, and like I'm telling you now, the addictions that I had in my life made me change jobs so many times. Because my drinking would get so bad that I either have to move on or I would be told to move on. So it ain't pretty, but it's a teaching tool, I think, for the young people. You don't have to go through that. Mm-hmm. You can make up your mind young and do things a lot easier than I did. Anyhow, I got hired at Cypress Anvil as a Native Employment Officer, and I think at that time John Chrétien was going to come up. He was a Minister of Indian Affairs, and part of his portfolio was the mines in that. So he John Chrétien was coming up, so it forced the mine to look for, I guess, a token Indian at that time. And I was that token Indian. I went up there as a Native Employment Officer, and I did that for 2 years there. But in the meantime, I moved back to Whitehorse. And by the way, when I was in Dawson, I found my wife. So I had a wife by then. So we moved to Whitehorse, and I worked as for Lula Johns as a career counselor. And we sent students out to universities, colleges, and we did a career planning for them, and that was called Northern Careers. So I did that for a while. But then Foothills was recruiting for people to work in the compressor stations, because there was supposed to be a pipeline coming from Prudhoe Bay down the Alaska Highway. And it was called Foothills. The subsidiary was called Foothills, and I got recruited as one of the Northerners. So I ended up in Alberta in Didsbury and trained as a controls technician, which is an electrician. So I'm an electrician too by trade. And that came in handy because when I started my business over by Christmas Bay, I wired the whole camp. So some things you learn that you can use later. But anyhow, I became an electrician with them. And the one thing that we did at the compressor station was just to learn how to take care of the control stations. Like when you press a button to start up the whole compressor station, there are a number of relays that pick up. And so we had to look after all that. If there was something wrong, then you had to diagnose which relay wasn't working in that. So anyhow, and the reason I'm telling you this story is sometimes you have to take it upon yourself to make things happen. And when I was becoming electricians with them, I was missing, the part I was missing was how to wire a house. I wanted to learn how to wire a house, and my boss at that time, he was moonlighting. He wired houses during the evenings and the weekends. And so I went up to him and I said, I'd like to help you wire a house because I wanted to learn how to do that. And so I said, you don't have to pay me. I said, I'll do it. Just want to learn. So you have to, if you want to learn something, you have to take your own education, your own skills learning, and go and find somebody to help you do that, learn things. Do that on your own. You don't have to wait for the teachers to tell you, this is what you got to do next if you're interested in anything. Because when I came back up, I for education, I got my GED, which is called General Education Diploma. And at the old Yukon College across the river, I took it upon myself to go to night school there, and I paid to go to night school. And anyhow, and I got my GED. So now I can get more jobs with a piece of paper that says, now you're a grade 12 student. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, so where was I?
You were at Yukon College.
So I came back. When I trained down south, I came back up. I missed the Yukon, so every summer I'd come back up, and finally, after 6 years down there, I told my wife, I think it's time to move back home. So we moved up. I got a job at Northwest Tel here as an electrician, going up and down the highways, visiting these microsites and looking after all that. And then again, I seen a advertisement in the paper about CYFN, CYI at that time. They were going into an election, and I told my wife, I said, when all of the land claims process was moving on, my friends like Harry Allen, Willie Joe, and all them, they were all leaders in the CYI at that time, and so I thought, well, I told my wife I want to run in this election, and she said, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "No," and but. When I was campaigning, and this is the way you got to think when you want to learn something. I didn't know a lot of people out there in the Yukon, but I had made friends with a lot of them, because in my days with with forestry, I lived in different, like I lived in Faro. I know Ross River people. I trained in forestry down in, because the only sawmills at that time was in Watson Lake. So I met people in Watson Lake. I know people in my hometown and in Old Crow. So that helped me a lot when I ran for, for one of the vice chair positions. And I knew that Bill Weber was, he had already been in the previous CYI. So I approached him and said, I'll pay half for your gas. Let's campaign together. and we'd be driving down the highway, and all of a sudden Bill would take off in the bush with the car down this old dirt road. And here there would be family down there, a family or two. We campaigned them too. But I knew in my mind that he knew people that I didn't, and if I can get on a shirt tail, I can reach more people. And so I got elected, and I think I got one of the highest numbers in the vice chair election. And at the same, you can't lose sight that during this time I'm still battling these addictions. So anyhow, and that's where that was the longest I stayed in one profession, was working for First Nations people, whether it was at CYI or my First Nations. And after I left CYI, before I left CYI, when I first got elected, I didn't know anything about budgets, finances. I didn't know anything about public speaking. So I thought, well, I'm going to take a bookkeeping course over at the Yukon College. And so I enrolled myself, and my wife didn't know, but I enrolled her too. and when the first night of the classes, I said, Barb, come on, we got to go to this class. And she said, what? I said, yeah, I enrolled you too. And that back then, that was $65 for the course each. So I started learning about numbers. And that's why I keep telling you, you have to take your own education and be the captain of it. You can't let other people, you can't have the thinking that other people are gonna help you do this. So you have to, anyhow, I knew that I wasn't very good at public speaking. So I joined the Toastmasters downtown here. There was one at the Northwest Tell building, a group that met every Tuesday night or something like that. So I started learning how to speak. They just give you a slip of paper that, it has one word, and you got to talk 5 minutes on it. And they have it upside down on the table, and when your turn comes, so you had to think on your feet. And so all these skills, you either push yourself to develop them, or it take you a long time to get where you're going. Mm-hmm. And to get where you're going, I learned early in life that you have to use other people's brains. You have to use other people's skills to achieve some of the goals you want to get to. Mm-hmm. I always tell young people there's many trails to the top of the mountain, and a lot of times you have to pick your own trail to get to the top. Mm. And the top of the mountain is any goal you want to reach. And along the way, you probably need somebody's help. And if you do that, give them credit or give them a benefit of the end product. So, and I've done that in my life. I've done a lot of for instance, can I tell you a story?
One more, buddy. You got one more. We're almost out of time, but one more story, that'll be it.
Okay.
No problem.
Anyhow, when I was in Whitehorse, I was in between jobs, and I had a house in Porter Creek, and I needed to pay the mortgage. So I was trying to find another job, and I seen in the papers that Kwon Dunn was looking for some people to do. This was before land claims. The band managers in that were running the First Nations then. But anyhow, there was an advertisement that they were looking for somebody to do a 5-year capital plan, and I at that time I was still looking for a job, couldn't find any, which is surprising. But anyhow, so I didn't know how to do a 5-year capital plan, but I knew a guy that was the director of the Baha'i Center, because at that time I met him when we were out there. Don and I Ventures did a 26-day course on doing your own business plan, and I actually got an award for having the best business plan, and it was a company called Wolf Electric. And when I told that to Elijah, he said, Wolf Electric? He said, well, what about the Crow? And he said, are the Crow just going to dance on your electric wire? I said, no. But anyhow, I keep getting sidetracked here. So I went out to, his name was Alan Murray, and I name people because I have to give them credit. They helped me get things done in my life. Anyhow, I went out to Alan and I said, and I knew he had two girls in college. So, and I didn't know how much they paid for a Baha'i, to manage a Baha'i center. I didn't think it was too much. So I went out there and I asked him, I said, you want to go 50-50 on this contract that Kwon Dunn has out there? And he said, yeah. He said, he agreed. So there were 5 other companies that pitched their proposal to Kwon Dunn, and we got accepted. So, and to do the work, Alan was stuck out there at the Baha'i Center, so we did a work plan for me. And I would go to all these different places and interview people. Like I interviewed about anything to do with capital, like Indian Affairs, CMHC, YTG, we wrote out a question, and I did the interviews and about all that information back. And then he said, this is where we have to get statistics. So I did that again. And when we produced that 5-year capital plan to Kwon Dunn, they were happy. They were happy they got it done because they were going to lose the money otherwise. And I was visiting my cousin Lena Smith Tooten, who was the band manager at Haines Junction, and I was just having coffee with her, and she was saying, oh man, we're going to lose this money that we got from the DIA to do a 5-year capital plan. I said, well, I just happen to have that capital plan still in my truck. I said, I have one in my truck. You want to see? We just did one. And she said, yeah. So I showed it to her, and she said, can you do one for us? And I said, yeah, I think I can. So based on, and I did that contract by myself. And based on my experience with the Kwon Dunn business or capital plan, I just went out and did the same things. And in those days, sometimes the band managers don't know that computers are capital too. So and then there was a green plan that had water trucks and that. So when Champagne Ajax started receiving money for all this, they thought it was Christmas time. All brand new computers, water trucks, and all that. But the thing is that I tell people too, you don't have to, if you want to accomplish something, you don't have to go to university. You don't have to go to college. You just have to use all the skills that are put together up there and cobble things together so that you can achieve your goals. And during that practice too, I started my own business because we had to have a business that applied for that contract. It was Tosoni Resources. So while I had steady jobs, I was doing contracts, and a lot of them were traditional knowledge studies for my First Nations. So I've done a number of traditional knowledge studies in Champagne Ajax. And, you know, I think we've come a long ways since this was given to Pierre, Elliott, Trudeau, and we still got a long ways to go. But I'm just telling you the things that I've done in my life. It sounds like maybe I'm boasting a bit, but I'm trying to tell you that you have to take control. You have to believe in yourself. You have to reach goals that you don't think is possible. I mean, who thought that I could produce a 5-year capital plan? I even did the spreadsheets. That's one thing that I learned. Oh, Peter.
Well, James, I didn't even get to ask you a second question, but it's all good, my friend. I appreciate, your journey and your openness to talk honestly about that. And James is also my executive elder, so it's a privilege for me to work not only with him, but also to utilize him as a resource. So with that, my friend, the time is up.
I just want to, one thing is, like I said, we've come a long ways, and I think we're at a level in society where people are talking about indigenization, what's that word?
Reconciliation,
reconciliation, and all that, and I think that I really am happy that is happening. It doesn't look like it sometimes because there's still lots of obstacles that we have to get over. But I just mentioned a couple. The university, it's becoming indigenized. Our programs include a lot of First Nations values, First Nations teachings. And the government, YTG, is open right now to helping us with a lot of First Nations issues. So we all have a responsibility. The elders have a responsibility to pass on their traditional knowledge, their teachings to the young. The young have a responsibility to grab a hold of their education and make it their own. But they also, with the education that they get, they have to give back to the systems or the First Nations that help you get there. You have to make a better place for our people in this world. Thank you. One more important thing. You cannot forget your culture and your language. Your culture gives you your identity. Your languages tell who you are. But I'm proud to say that we did pass a language act and Barb Hume here help with that, help with the drafting of the Language Act. And we have an interpreter at our General Assemblies interpreting for the elders. So you have to. There was a university program that was done out of my camp. It's called Two Eyes Seeing, and it's seeing the world in two eyes or through two eyes. You know, the Indigenous eye and also the Western society's eye. I always say that I have one foot on the land and one hand on the computer. So I just can't stress that we as First Nations people live in two worlds, and we have to make that work for us. And I'm glad to say that we have a lot of young people that are taking up our language now. Thank you.
Mr. James Allen, folks. Thank you.